Hello, my name is Erin Small. I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent for Prince Edward County, and I am very excited to be speaking with you all today about flowers and floriculture and a little bit about floral design. So I hope you enjoy this short presentation, which I have titled Field to Vase. So to start off, I'm going to hit on growing zinnias and sunflowers. I know floriculture is super broad, so I thought that the best way to do this would be a little bit specific, and then you can use these general growing techniques and methods across the board. Of course, things will change a little bit according to the variety of flower that you grow, but some of these things will stay the same as far as prepping your garden and getting your beds ready to plant. So after that, I'm going to touch a little bit on the art of flower arrangement and how proper selection of flowers from the field can improve your flower arrangement and quality, thus improving your marketability. And lastly, I'm going to talk about flower care tips, things to increase the shelf life, because we know that whether or not you're purchasing flowers or growing them yourselves, flowers and floriculture can be an expensive industry. So getting the most shelf life as possible is always a good thing. So when you're growing zinnias and sunflowers, the first thing you want to do is choose a good flower bed site. You know, any kind of flower you're doing, anything you're growing at all, really, you want a good site for it. So you can see here, I've got a couple of pictures of the garden that I started with here at our extension office that I kind of turned into a whole nother space. So for zinnias and sunflowers specifically, they prefer at least 6 hours of direct sun. Well-drained soils. They should bloom 8 to 12 weeks after sowing, so plan out accordingly. Plants are usually spaced 6 to 18 inches apart, so be sure that adequate space is provided. You know, I'm being specific here with these two varieties of flowers, but these rules apply to whatever you're planting. So when you're prepping the flower bed, you want to have good fertilizer. You can go to your local extension office and you can get your soil samples done, ship that box off to Virginia Tech. Something else that I really like to do to be proactive with weeds is to put down a weed liner. They make a couple different kinds. The one that I like to use is 6 feet wide, and it's got the green stripes running down it that space your rows 12 inches apart. So, you know, of course, that's going to vary. If you're growing something like eucalyptus, you're going to want wider spacing because you know that that plant is going to branch, versus if you're growing something like tulips or daffodils, where you can have those a little bit closer together. So your weed cloth kind of sets the width of your rows that you're planting. So do that accordingly. You know, it's going to change a little bit for whatever you're doing. What I like to do is use a torch to burn individual holes into that weed cloth. That way you can have a specific spot. You can space it out. You can get, it's like a metal tray that has predetermined holes in it that are different spaces in width. So 6 inches or 8 inches, and it's a big square. So you can actually burn right into those metal holes as like a template on your mat. That way everything's even. You're maximizing the space that you've got in the materials that you've purchased. So when it's time to sow your seeds, you want to make sure that you are using high quality seeds. You don't have to use high quality, but I prefer to because the germination rate is going to be higher. In this picture, you can see that I was actually able to use some flowers from Floret Flower Farm in Washington State, which was pretty cool. We got to test those out here at our extension office. You can see I did it in this raised bed. And what I did with that is I put my weed liner down after I had tilled the soil underneath to really prevent weeds from coming up from the bottom. I did about 6 to 8 inches of topsoil, which I mixed with fertilizer. I had a mixture of cow manure and a mushroom compost that I blended into the soil. And then I put a thin mulch layer on top. You don't want your mulch too thick because that can create a space for moisture to be held and mold and disease to be collected. So really making sure your mulch is not too thick, even though it can be aesthetic and aesthetically appealing. You know, you want to make sure that you're mindful of your plants underneath and the space that they're going to need. So when you're sowing your seeds, you want to make sure that they're spaced well. If you just broadcast them, they'll come up like this in this picture, and you'll need to space them as they grow. You know, there's nothing wrong with kind of just broadcasting something like a zinnia and then spacing it out later. If you don't space it out, they're not going to get good airflow. Bacteria and mold and disease can develop, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So as your seeds emerge, they'll need to be spaced according to the recommendation on your seed packet, or your tuber bag or bulb bag, whatever it is that you're using, with the proper recommendations. So zinnias and sunflowers, you can actually pinch them, and there's a whole variety of different kinds of flowers that you can pinch. Pinching encourages branching, longer stems, more blooms. So if you are looking to have a cut flower business, to sell cut flowers, whether you've got people coming to the farm or you're trying to market to a local florist, having long stems is always appreciated. For florists, I'm a floral designer on the side, and I always love to get a long stem because then I'm not limited to my container that I'm able to use. So if you're looking for a low flower border, some of you may just be wanting to improve your flower garden at home. You just might want a little edging on your sidewalk that's pretty, smells good, colorful. So you might not be worried about pinching your flowers, but if you do want those longer stems, you do want to pinch. And you can pinch throughout the growing season. It's November, and I just now cut down my zinnia bed, which is kind of sad, but I was pinching up until probably 2 weeks ago, and it was still encouraging blooms. So your zinnias will love to be pinched because it's longer branches, there's more airflow, and they're going to thrive. So you can see here some pictures. Some people are like, oh my gosh, you're pinching and you're just taking this flower bud off, and will it actually bloom? Yes, it does. So you can see here in this picture the little bud, and you can see where it's kind of forked into 3 branches from that spot that I pinched it. And it just continues to grow. So the zinnia's got to be 4 or 5 feet tall. So branching really does work with a variety of flowers. So check what individual variety you're growing and see if pinching is something that you can apply. So when you were doing the wiggle test, this is something, it's fun to be able to go outside and actually practice this. And I know we're on a Zoom today, so you can't do that, but if you are able to go outside and practice this, I know your zinnia bed is probably cut down like mine is. What you can do is you can take that stem, and right below, if the top of my finger is where the bloom is, you want to come down a few inches and just wiggle it. And if that stem is stiff, it's ready to be cut. If it wiggles, and you'll really see it, if it wiggles, then that stem is not ready to be cut, and that zinnia is not ready to be in a vase yet. So even though your flower might be full, might look like it's ready to be used in a container, it's not ready yet unless you've done that wiggle test and that stem is stiff. And the reason you want that stiff stem is not only will it support that flower in the vase, it tells you that that stem is fully developed, that flower is fully mature, and that's how you know it's time to use it. There are all different varieties of individual flowers we're wanting to grow. There's probably a lot of varieties out there, so you can choose what you want. You can do different colors to what a local florist might want. Inside the market, there are a lot of flower hubs throughout the state online. Richmond has one. You can get on there and advertise your flowers online. So whatever flower variety you're growing, there will be diseases, there will be insects that will like to attack your flower. Some of these zinnia diseases are very common across the board, such as powdery mildew, leaf blight, root rot. These are all things that attack many different varieties of flowers. And the main culprits for diseases in floral production is poor air circulation and uneven moisture. So Really setting up your bed correctly, spacing those seeds well, will give you an advantage in the field. So zinnias, you can cut them, you can dry them. They last 1 to 2 weeks in the vase with proper care. You want to make sure that you're changing water of whatever flowers that you're growing after you cut them every couple of days, because algae will start to grow in the water, bacteria will develop, and that'll clog the xylem and phloem of your stem, and it won't allow your flower to drink up water or nutrients well at all, and it'll just die. Um, Double flowers, if you want to dry any flower variety, if you have a double flower head, those are going to be best for drying. And you can hang the bunches out of direct light. So some things like zinnias, you might want to dry, yarrow, eucalyptus, pincushions. There's all kinds of flowers that you can dry. So if you have a fuller flower head, those typically dry the best and tend to preserve the color the longest. Status is another one that many florists like because it can be used as a dry or a fresh flower. So if you're looking into sunflower development, this kind of breaks down a lot of details of sunflowers. I know sunflowers are super common to grow as well as zinnias. That's why I wanted to include them specifically in this presentation. So you can see here that there are lots of stages of sunflower development, from the emergence to the early flower to the late flower. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen what those different stages kind of look like. So sunflowers are grown throughout the world, and it's pretty cool that the United States is actually 6th on that growing list of production. You know, Ukraine and Russia have a whole lot of that production. That's where the plant was actually commercialized, but the plant is native to North America. Sunflower oil is most preferred in Europe, South American countries, and Mexico. And the countries listed on the chart above, as you can see, the U.S. being one of them, is actually including 86% of the world's oilseed production. So that other category is really a small percentage of those other countries and what they're doing. So water requirements for the sunflower. Something I love about a sunflower that I found out is it actually is better at taking in water than corn because its root goes so deep. So that root, that taproot on a sunflower actually goes to around 4 feet deep. So it can remove water from a whole nother table in the soil. So it's better at soaking up water than corn, but it doesn't utilize that water as well as corn does. So something else about a sunflower and water is good crop rotation with a sunflower is always helpful. So it uses nitrogen and other nutrients that leach below your shallow root crops. Something else is fertility has little influence on total water use, but as fertility increases, water use efficiency increases because your yield will increase with that sunflower. So sunflower diseases and pests, there are a pile of them. They can be a very high-risk crop because of the number of different pests and diseases that do affect sunflowers. So IPM can be used to minimize your losses. 3 pests that I included here are the cutworm, the weevil, and the beetle. The table on the right-hand side of the screen includes all different kinds of things that will impact your sunflower crop in the different times of years that they're present. So something I like to say is if a flower doesn't grow, change the environment, not the flower. That's something that I have to think about a whole lot producing cut flowers, but I also think we can apply that to our own lives. You know, flowers provide a lot of emotional excitement. You know, flowers always make people happy, and most of the time, and we use them to mark special occasions. You know, if you think of times in your life when flowers are present, you know, it's weddings, it's funerals, it's birthdays, it's special holidays, anniversaries. Flowers are always kind of marking a big moment in time, I feel like. And so It's important to see the intrinsic value in growing flowers as well. So if you get discouraged in your production, think about all the other emotional values that flowers have in general, and maybe that'll spur you on and encourage you. But again, if a flower doesn't grow, just change where it is. Don't change what it is. I think we can apply that to ourselves as well. You know, if we aren't growing, don't change ourselves, change where we are. So going into flower arrangement a little bit, I just wanted to touch on this because I do have a lot of interest in it. So when you're doing a floral design, you want to have a focal flower, your filler flower, line, and then line flowers. You want shears, you want good clean scissors. You want to wash them between every use, really, because bacteria can be collected on there just as easily as it can be collected in stems in a vase. And then you want good clean containers as well. So why do flowers die prematurely in your vase? So there are many reasons: stem diameter and thickness. So again, when you're going out to the field and you are collecting your flowers, you want to make sure that that stem is ready to go, that you've actually chosen an appropriate stem. Genetics of the flower can affect it, inability of the stem to absorb water. A reason a lot of times that the stem is unable to absorb water is because it hasn't been cut properly. So a lot of times when you are cutting a flower, you're just going to grab some scissors, but actually using a floral knife is a better route to go because it's a straight one cut. If you're using scissors, it's actually crunching the xylem and phloem of the stem, and it's preventing maximum water absorption. Lack of carbohydrates, excessive transpiration, bacterial growth and disease. Again, we talked about making sure that that water is changed very regularly in your vase. Ethylene gas is part of why flowers die prematurely, and we'll cover that in the next slide, and also improper surrounding conditions. So ethylene gas is a naturally occurring plant hormone, and it's involved in the natural aging process of many things. It's released as an odorless, colorless gas, so we can't see it because it's a gas. It's extremely harmful to cut flowers, and it's produced by ripening fruit and vegetables, decomposing plant material, bacteria, burning of gasoline, diesel fuel, firewood, and tobacco. Well, you might not store a flower arrangement in a garage where there's gasoline, but maybe you are a florist, or maybe you are harvesting in bulk and you want somewhere dry and contained, like a garage, to store your flower buckets fresh from the field. If you have a car in there too, your flowers are going to be exposed to gasoline, and it's going to make them wilt faster. If you like to store flowers on a mantle above a fireplace that's wood burning, that burning firewood is releasing ethylene gas, and that'll contribute to your flowers dying more quickly. Maybe you want to have a small flower shop, or maybe you have a roadside stand where you're selling flowers and you have the fruit, you have your fresh apples or peaches right next to your flowers. That fruit, as it's sitting in the sun, ripening, getting good, is releasing ethylene gas. Maybe even in your kitchen, you have your flowers on your kitchen table and you have a bowl of apples right next to it. Well, you need to separate them a little bit because that gas is extremely harmful. If you go into grocery stores, it drives me crazy. You go into a produce section and there's always flowers right next to the produce department. So maybe we need to get on some grocery stores and educate them a little bit about ethylene gas. And so some other ways you can stop flowers from dying. These are just some tricks that I do. You can add a baby aspirin to the water. You can drop a copper penny into the water. Both of these things are acidifiers, and they decrease the pH of the water and preserve your flowers longer. They help to keep that stem open and ready to absorb water. 1 teaspoon of sugar, bleach, and lime and lemon juice you can mix into water as well, and that'll help to preserve it. So proper flower care. Every time you change the water, you should be recutting your stems because the pores in those stems are going to be clogged up just from the flower aging. As soon as you cut a flower, it's basically starting to age, So recutting these stems is very helpful. Pruning any wilted leaves or dead flower heads from your arrangement. is also a good proper flower care technique. You want to make sure that you don't have any foliage below the vase line, because as your flower ages, that foliage is going to drop off and it's going to go into the vase, into your water, creating a space for bacteria to grow. And then we talked about changing your water already. So these are some resources that I used. You can follow our local extension office in Prince Edward on Facebook or Instagram and see more of our flower things that we're doing here, as well as other things we're doing at our extension office. I really enjoyed speaking with you all today a little bit about cut flowers, and I hope that you learned something new and will go share it with a friend.